Welcome back to the deep dive. If you ever feel like your inner world is less like a calm, flowing stream and more like a nonstop mandatory news ticker stuck in your head.
Yeah, that constant loop.
Exactly, full of anxious thoughts about the future, maybe replaying past mistakes, judging yourself, or just that endless list of things you forgot to do. If any of that sounds familiar, then this deep dive is definitely for you.
Absolutely. We're digging into some really fascinating material today, all centered around what might be the most fundamental spiritual challenge, really, across pretty much all traditions,
Which is.
which is how to stop that cycle, that endless loop of compulsive thinking, what we usually just call, crippling overthinking.
Right. And the sources you shared, they focus on a particular spiritual teacher's insights, right?
Yeah.
Based on conversations about Zen, among other things.
That's right. And these insights are all about consciousness, about thought, and crucially, about the present moment. It's about getting down to some very fundamental realizations.
So our mission today, essentially, is to figure out how to move beyond just coping, beyond just managing stress.
Which is important, but it's not the whole picture.
No.
Yeah.
We want to understand how to achieve a really radical, lasting shift, how to actually find genuine presence, genuine peace.
And what's so compelling about this particular material is how it distills these, sometimes very complex ancient practices into instructions that are almost shockingly simple. Deceptively simple, you could say?
Deceptively simple, I like that, because the core idea, as I understand it from the sources, is about freeing our true selves from what's called the tyranny of the mind.
Exactly. It's about an extraction process in a way.
Okay, so let's unpack that. The goal for us today, get to the absolute practical core. How do we actually free ourselves from that involuntary compulsive thinking?
And just as importantly, what does that freedom feel like? What is that state of peaceful awareness deep down?
Yeah, what was the experience of it?
And as often happens when you're exploring these deep truths, the path forward often starts with something surprisingly direct.
It really does.
Yeah.
The teacher we're looking at, he talks about this pivotal moment, right? The spark that kind of changed everything for him.
Yeah, conversation with a Zen monk.
And he was apparently expecting, some deep philosophical discussion, complex meditation techniques, maybe lists of rules.
The usual stuff you might expect. Theories of enlightenment.
Right. But instead, the monk just looks at him and gives him this incredibly blunt, almost abrupt two-word instruction. What was it?
The monk just said, "Stop thinking."
Stop thinking, just like that. It almost feels anticlimactic, doesn't it?
A little bit, yeah.
After years of maybe searching, doing complex practices, the answer is just stop thinking. It's almost funny. It's so direct.
But that directness, I think, is precisely why it's so potent. It's like a little cognitive shock.
How so?
Well, it completely bypasses the intellectual mind, doesn't it? The part of us that always wants complexity, that wants intricate steps and theories.
True. Doesn't give the mind anything to analyze, really.
Exactly. And it points to this deeper truth that often the most profound spiritual insights are hidden right there in their simplicity. They're almost too simple for the mind to grasp initially.
So that instruction, stop thinking, it's like the launching pad, the starting point for understanding where real joy, real peace actually comes from.
Precisely. It sets the stage perfectly for our first section.
Okay, let's dive in then.
Okay.
Section 1. The core realization, Zen, and the cessation of thought.
What's really illuminating about the teacher's account of this is that he admitted something quite interesting afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
He said that the monk's words, "Zen is really quite simple, you stop thinking," resonated so deeply because when he actually reflected on it,
Uh-huh.
he realized he was already kind of heading in that direction. He was experiencing moments of mental quiet, even without consciously trying to force them based on that specific instruction yet.
Okay, that's important. So it wasn't like flipping a switch because the monk said it, but the words named something that was starting to happen anyway.
Sort of, yes. It gave him the conceptual framework, the validation for what was emerging. But we absolutely need to clarify this right up front for anyone listening.
Yeah, because stop thinking sounds like, well, becoming empty-headed or something.
Right. And the source material is really clear on this. This isn't about becoming a blank slate. It's not about shutting down your intellect entirely.
We need our thoughts for daily life, obviously. Planning, problem solving, communicating.
Of course. Functional thought is essential. It's a tool. What the teacher experienced ceasing wasn't that. It was the overthinking.
Ah, okay. The distinction is crucial.
It's absolutely vital. It wasn't the stopping of useful, practical thought. It was the stopping of compulsive thought.
Define that a bit more. Compulsive thought.
It's that involuntary, relentless, usually self-referential noise in the head. The stuff that just cycles round and round, producing worry, anxiety, replaying scenarios.
A mental hamster wheel.
Exactly, that hamster wheel, that's what stopped running, or at least slowed down dramatically.
So the mind quieted down. But not because he was actively wrestling it into submission.
No, that's not the sense you get. It seems it was more about the identification fading, the deep-seated belief that I am this voice in my head, that these thoughts are me.
That belief started to dissolve.
Yes. And when that identification loosens its grip, the compulsive thinking doesn't have the same fuel. It's like the engine runs out of gas because the driver isn't constantly hitting the accelerator.
Okay, that makes sense. And the result of this shift?
Immediate. And quite dramatic, according to the account, the emergence of these long stretches of what he described as very peaceful awareness.
Peaceful awareness, not just blankness, but
Yes.
peace.
The silence wasn't empty, it wasn't a void, it was described as a kind of fullness, a presence.
And this peaceful awareness, it wasn't just passive or quiet, like a state of resignation.
Not at all. It was actually generative. The source talks about something vibrant sort of building up out of that quiet awareness.
Which was?
A deep joy.
Deep joy.
Yeah.
You talk a bit more about the intensity of that, because the description is quite powerful.
It really is. This is where we move from just talking about it to trying to grasp the actual lived experience. The joy was apparently so consuming, so intense, that the teacher used the word incredible to describe it.
Incredible.
Yeah. And there's this specific anecdote he shares. Just sitting, sometimes on a park bench, nothing special happening externally.
It's pretty.
Just sitting for long periods, completely immersed, completely absorbed in this state. He actually called it bliss with a capital B.
Capital B bliss, to emphasize that totality, that overwhelming quality.
Exactly. It wasn't just feeling happy. It was a fundamental shift in the very ground of his being.
Wow. When you think about that state, that bliss, and compare it to, well, the usual internal monologue most of us live with daily. The anxiety, the chaos, the self-criticism.
The contrast must have been absolutely immense, almost night and day.
Yeah. Which leads to another fascinating point the source material brings up about why that peak intensity, that capital B bliss, might lessen over time.
Right. The teacher noted that later on, the deep peace remained. It was consistent, foundational. But that initial, almost overwhelming intensity of the bliss itself, that had faded somewhat.
So what happened? Did the enlightenment wear off? Was the bliss just a temporary high that wasn't sustainable?
No, not according to the explanation offered. The idea put forward is something we could call the contrast effect.
The contrast effect. Explain that.
The thinking is that the initial experience, that incredibly powerful, almost blinding bliss, was so intense, partly because of the stark contrast, because he could vividly remember and feel the difference from his previous state of consciousness.
Which was described as
a state of intense suffering, confusion, constant mental noise, chaotic thought.
Okay, so it's like, imagine being locked in a completely dark, noisy room for years.
Right.
And then suddenly stepping out into bright, warm sunlight and birdsong.
Exactly. That initial moment, the light seems almost painfully bright. The quiet feels deafeningly peaceful. The contrast is overwhelming.
But then, after a while, your eyes adjust to the light. Your ears adjust to the quiet.
Precisely. It just becomes normal. Pleasant, yes, but normal. The light doesn't seem blinding anymore.
So as this new state of peaceful awareness becomes the established baseline, the internal norm,
the sharp contrast with the previous suffering naturally fades, and so the intensity derived from that contrast also fades. The peace becomes, as the source says, quite normal.
So it's not that the peace diminishes. It's still there, deep and real.
Absolutely. It's just that the memory and feeling of the intense suffering, which was needed to amplify the feeling of peace into overwhelming bliss, has dissolved.
That implies something really important then. True, foundational peace isn't really an emotion in the way we normally think of it. It's not a sleeting high.
No, it seems to be more like the underlying state, the quiet, steady condition that emerges naturally when the internal conflict, the internal war, stops.
And that initial bliss, that's like this system shock reaction, the relief.
Kinda, yeah. The shock of the system realizing, wow, I'm no longer constantly at war with myself. This is what it feels like to just be.
It's a realization that the normal human condition, the background noise, the anxiety, the pressure we live with, that was actually the suffering.
Yes. And this piece is simply the natural state revealed when that suffering ceases. Understanding this baseline, this normalcy of peace, is really critical before we can move on to the next part.
Which is the actual work involved.
Exactly, because it's not just about waiting for bliss to happen. There's a practice, a task.
Right. And that leads us perfectly into section 2. The spiritual task rescuing kidnapped consciousness. Because now we're shifting from that personal story
To the universal problem. The predicament that, according to this teacher, all spiritual traditions are fundamentally trying to address in one way or another.
Okay, you said earlier, here's where it gets really interesting. Lay it on us. What's the core assertion here?
The sources define the human condition, the common state, in really powerful, almost alarming terms. They state, consciousness has been kidnapped by thought.
Kidnapped. That's a strong word.
It is. It implies being held against your will. Trapped. And specifically trapped in involuntary compulsive thinking.
That analogy, kidnapping, it's actually brilliant. Because it really frames the internal monologue differently, doesn't it? It's not just a minor annoyance, background static.
No. In this view, it's the jailer. It's the force holding our essential awareness, our true consciousness, hostage.
Keeping it locked up in this relentless stream of thoughts.
And again, this clarifies that thought itself isn't the enemy. We need thoughts. We use them functionally all the time, planning dinner, writing an email.
Sure.
The problem is the involuntary, the compulsive nature of so much of our thinking. Our awareness gets dragged along, forced to follow every twist and turn of the mental stream, fueling the noise, losing its own inherent freedom.
Okay, so awareness gets hijacked. Kidnapped by this compulsive movement. What's the mechanism? How does this happen? The source material talks about the sense of self, right? The superficial I.
Yes, this is absolutely crucial. Probably the single most important detail to grasp in this whole model.
Go on.
The sources explain that basically every thought that arises, especially the self-referential ones.
Like, I need to, or I feel, or why did I?
Exactly. Thoughts like, I hate this traffic, I should have said that differently, I'm not good enough, what if I fail? Every single one of those thoughts, the teaching says, is automatically imbued with a sense of self.
Imbued with a sense of self. Meaning
we don't just observe the thought dispassionately, like watching a cloud drift by. No, the I, our sense of identity, merges with the thought. It becomes one with it.
Can you give a concrete example? Walk us through that traffic scenario again. How does the I fuse with the frustration?
Okay, so you're stuck in traffic. Functional thought might be, okay, traffic's bad. Maybe I should check the map for another route. That's using thought as a tool. Right.
Productive.
But compulsive thought, the kidnapped consciousness, sounds different. It sounds like, I am so frustrated I can never get anywhere on time. Why does this always happen to me? This is ruining my whole day.
Ah, I see. The I is right there in the center of the emotional storm.
Exactly. The self, the sense of me, has become completely indistinguishable from the feeling of frustration, the narrative of being victimized by the traffic, the whole story around it. The I gets confused with the movement of the thought itself.
So if the I is confused with that movement, and that movement is compulsive, involuntary, often negative, then the actual spiritual work isn't about fixing the traffic, is it?
Not primarily, no.
And it's not even about stopping all thoughts, as we clarified. The real task. It's about dissolving that confusion, separating the observer from the observed.
Precisely. You nailed it. The source explicitly defines the task for you, the listener. The work is to free consciousness from where it's been trapped.
Okay. And how? What's the method?
The method is also explicit. Stepping out of the movement of thought.
Stepping out of the movement. What does that actually mean for someone listening right now, maybe stuck in their own internal noise loop?
It means starting to recognize that the I that worries, the I that judges, the I that obsesses, that's actually the voice you are hearing. It's not the fundamental awareness that hears the voice.
So recognizing the difference between the thinker and the awareness of the thinker.
Yes. The moment you can step back, even just a little, and witness the thought stream without being completely swept away by it, in that moment, you've stepped out of the movement.
And the I is no longer trapped inside the story the thought is telling.
Exactly. You create a little space, you start to disidentify.
And in that space, what do we find?
That's where you begin to reconnect with the awareness itself, the part of you that's aware of the thoughts. This awareness, the source calls it the unconditioned consciousness.
Unconditioned consciousness. That term comes up for someone who finds that a bit abstract. What does unconditioned really mean here practically?
It just means it exists before or independent of conditions. Your thoughts are conditioned, right?
Yeah.
By your past, your fears, your culture, what you had for breakfast.
Yeah, they're shaped by things.
But the awareness that notices those thoughts, The
Yeah.
pure sense of being present, that's not conditioned by anything. It doesn't need a particular thought or feeling or situation to exist. It just is. It's the background stillness.
So stepping out of the thought movement is like stepping back from the conditioned noise into the unconditioned quiet.
Beautifully put, yes. You step back into that which is always already there beneath the surface noise. That awareness is the true source of peace, clarity, even inspiration, which the mind's compulsive activity usually obscures.
Okay. So we've established the problem, kidnapped consciousness, fused with compulsive thought, and the solution stepping out, recognizing the awareness behind the thought. Now the big question, how do we actually live this? How do we maintain that separation when we're busy, interacting with the world, doing things?
Right, because we can't just sit on a cushion all day stepping out of thought.
Exactly. Which brings us neatly to section 3. Presence in action, honoring the doing.
This is key. The teaching is very clear. Present moment awareness isn't just for meditation. It has to become the central focus of your life. And that includes when you're active, when you're doing things.
So when you're actively engaged in a task, what's the instruction?
The instruction is that your attention must be giving fully to that action. Completely.
And the source uses strong language here. It doesn't just say focus. It says you honor it, you give it attention.
Yes, honor it. That implies a certain quality, doesn't it? A sense of respect, of value given to the task itself, no matter how small or mundane it might seem.
Treating every action, maybe even washing the dishes or typing an email, with a kind of mindful respect.
That's precisely the feeling, but of course, this is where modern life immediately throws up roadblocks.
Yeah, I can hear the objections already. Honor folding the laundry. I've got 10 other things to do.
Exactly. The constant pressure to multitask, to be efficient, to think ahead. It makes this idea of full, singular attention on one thing sound, well, the source says almost impossible, or at least impractical.
But the source anticipates this disbelief, right?
Yeah.
And it offers a really insightful redefinition of stress.
It does. It says, quite radically, that stress does not actually come from the activity itself, even if the activity is demanding.
So where does it come from, then, if it's not the task?
It comes from the mind being fragmented. It comes from mental time travel. While you're physically doing task A, your mind is projecting itself into the future.
Worrying about task B, C, and D.
Yes. Worrying about the outcome, the deadline, agonizing over past mistakes related to it, or, as the source puts it, thinking of several other things that you really should be doing also at the same time.
So it's the internal split, the conflict between what you are doing and what your mind thinks you should be doing or will be doing.
That's the source of the stress, that mental fragmentation, that internal tug of war, not the task itself.
That makes a lot of sense, actually, the feeling of being pulled in multiple directions mentally.
Which is exhausting. And this is precisely why the sources introduce that wonderfully simple definition from a Zen master.
What was that again?
Zen is doing one thing at a time.
Doing one thing at a time, that's it.
That's the practical antidote. It cuts through the entire multitasking myth. It's radical simplicity offered as the most effective strategy, not just for peace, but actually for better performance, too.
How so? How does doing one thing at a time lead to better performance?
Well, the source states that when you give your full, undivided attention, when you truly honor the doing, the activity naturally achieves high quality.
Because you're actually present for it. Your resources aren't split.
Exactly. You're bringing your full capacity to bear on that one thing instead of scattering your energy across 10 different mental tabs. You make fewer mistakes, you're more thorough.
And what about tasks that need creativity? Does just focusing block that?
Quite the opposite, according to this teaching. If the activity genuinely requires creativity or inspiration, the source suggests that inspiration will flow.
Flow from where?
From that deeper place we talked about, from the unconditioned consciousness, from presence, because the channel isn't clogged up with the noise of compulsive thinking, worry, and mental multitasking.
So quieting the surface mind allows deeper insights to emerge.
That's the idea. The wisdom or creativity you need is often already there, just beneath the surface chatter. Presence creates the space for it to be heard or felt.
Let's go back to that mundane example.
Yeah.
Doing the dishes. You mentioned it earlier. Okay, maybe we don't need divine inspiration to scrub a pot.
Probably not, no.
So why is honoring that simple activity still so important? What's the benefit?
Because the spiritual practice here isn't primarily about achieving a perfect outcome, like the cleanest dish ever. It's about the state of consciousness you inhabit while doing it.
The process, not just the result.
Exactly. Think about the alternative. If you do the dishes while mentally miles away wishing you were doing something else, resenting the task, thinking about your stressful job tomorrow, internally resisting the simple act of washing.
Yeah, that feels tense just thinking about it.
Right, that state of internal resistance, that mental friction, it consumes your energy, your life force. And the sad truth, as the source notes, is that the state of constant internal resistance to the present moment is how many people live all the time.
Wow. So the quality of our entire life isn't really defined by the grand events, but by the level of presence or resistance we bring to the seemingly small, everyday moments.
That seems to be the core message. If you can wash dishes with full attention, honoring the water, the soap, the movement, you're not just washing dishes, you're practicing presence. You're mastering the active dimension of this spiritual work.
So honoring the mundane becomes the training ground. It turns a chore into an anchor for awareness.
Beautifully said, yes. It allows presence to infuse the ordinary.
Okay, that covers general activities. But life isn't always just mundane chores. Sometimes situations are genuinely difficult, unpleasant, or even harmful. That brings us to section 4, navigating toxic situations and honoring life.
Yes, this is crucial because the core responsibility, as the source puts it, is to honor life by honoring the present moment, whatever form it takes.
But does honoring the present moment mean we have to passively accept truly terrible circumstances, like an abusive relationship or a soul-crushing job?
No, absolutely not. This is where discernment becomes critical. Presence isn't passivity, it's conscious awareness, and that includes awareness of harm. The sources provide a vital ethical check here.
What's that check?
The first question you have to honestly ask yourself in any difficult situation, especially work, is it possible for me to honor the work that I'm doing in this situation?
Okay, let's explore the nuances. Many jobs aren't exactly inspiring, right? They might be repetitive, boring, maybe the boss is annoying.
Right. The vast middle ground of work life for many people.
In that kind of situation, can I still honor the doing?
Yes, absolutely. If you bring presence to it, you can still choose to perform the tasks carefully, diligently, with focus. You can honor the process of your work, showing up, doing your best with the task at hand, even if you don't particularly love the job itself or the environment isn't perfect.
So presence allows you to maintain your integrity and quality, even in uninspiring circumstances. You honor the action itself.
Exactly. You act with awareness and care, consciously and carefully, navigating the imperfections without letting them necessarily poison your inner state completely.
But what about situations that go beyond just uninspiring? What if the situation is genuinely toxic? The source uses terms like so dysfunctional or work that is soul-destroying.
Yes, it addresses these extremes. Maybe it's a workplace with constant bullying, harassment, unethical demands, or maybe the work itself fundamentally violates your core values.
What then? Does honoring the present moment mean staying and trying to find presence amidst that destruction?
This is where the teaching shifts significantly. In those extreme situations where the environment is so permeated by negativity, dysfunction, or abuse that maintaining presence, honoring the activity, seems genuinely impossible.
Because you're constantly being attacked or forced into compromising yourself.
Yes. If the situation is actively undermining your well-being, your integrity, your very ability to be present because you're always reacting to negativity, then the instruction is clear. One needs to remove yourself from that situation.
Wow. Okay, so that's a powerful validation. Presence doesn't mean being a doormat. It doesn't mean accepting abuse or destruction passively.
Absolutely not. Consciousness needs space. It needs a certain degree of freedom to flourish. If the external environment is fundamentally hostile to your inner freedom, if it constantly forces you back into negative reactivity, into that compulsive thought loop of anger, fear, or resentment,
Then staying isn't honoring life.
then leaving, removing yourself, becomes the truly conscious act. It becomes the way you honor life, your own consciousness. You recognize that you cannot maintain presence while actively participating in something that is fundamentally destructive to your spirit.
But there's a huge hurdle here, isn't there? The source mentions it specifically. Removing yourself often means,
It often means stepping into uncertainty.
and the mind hates uncertainty, doesn't it? Even more sometimes than certain misery. Why is uncertainty so paralyzing for us?
Well, think about the egoic mind we discussed earlier, the one fused with compulsive thought. Its whole game is based on control, prediction, knowing what's coming, relying on past experiences.
It wants familiar ground, even if that ground is miserable.
Exactly. It can accurately predict the daily misery of the toxic job. It knows that script, but the future outside that job, that's a blank page, total unknown. And to the ego, the unknown feels terrifyingly like death, like annihilation.
So the mind whispers, better the devil you know.
Precisely. Stay here. It's awful, but at least you know how awful it is. Don't risk the unknown. It could be even worse. Even if the unknown holds the genuine potential for freedom and peace.
That's the psychological trap, the resistance we have to overcome.
Yes. And it requires real honesty. The individual has to make that deep assessment. Am I genuinely able to find presence here, to honor the situation consciously and carefully despite its flaws? Or is this environment fundamentally incompatible with presence for me right now? Do I need to seek something else?
That word compatible feels really significant here.
It is. The source notes that many things in life are compatible with presence. You can be present doing almost anything, theoretically, but quite a few other things are not.
So it requires a clear-eyed assessment of our environment, our work, maybe even relationships. If they consistently drag us back into that negative, compulsive thought movement, that state of being kidnapped,
Then they need to be seriously reassessed. And sometimes the most conscious, responsible choice, the way you honor life most deeply, is to make a change, even if it involves stepping into that feared uncertainty.
okay. We really covered the active state, honoring the doing one thing at a time, and knowing when to leave a toxic situation. But what about the other times? What about when we're not actively doing something?
Ah, yes, the passive state. This brings us to section 5, presence in rest, the deeper practice of beingness.
So this is about the moments when you're just sitting, or walking without a specific goal, or just standing, waiting.
Exactly.
Hmm.
What the source calls the more kind of passive state of presence, and it emphasizes that this is very important too, perhaps equally important as presence in action.
Why is it so important? Is it just about relaxing?
It's more than relaxation. It's important because these moments of stillness or unstructured time are precisely when the compulsive mind tends to rush in and fill the perceived void.
Right. When external demands lessen, the internal noise often cranks up.
Exactly. The mental chatter starts looking for something to do, something to chew on. And so the critical question the source poses for you, the listener, in these moments is, are you the observing presence at this moment?
Are you aware of just being?
Yes. And this is where, apparently, many people get a bit tripped up or misunderstand the practice.
How so?
Well, think about it. If you're in a situation with lots of engaging external stimuli, say, you're walking through a stunningly beautiful forest or watching a captivating sunset.
It's relatively easy to be present then, right? Your attention is naturally held by the beauty around you.
Exactly. The environment kind of does the heavy lifting for you. Your senses are engaged. But the source deliberately uses examples where the environment is not inspiring.
Like what?
Like sitting on an airplane, maybe stuck in a middle seat with no window, or waiting in a long line at the DMV, or sitting in a sterile airport lounge for hours.
Okay, yeah. Situations with zero external wow factor. No wonders to capture your attention.
Precisely. The external anchors for presence are absent. And what typically happens then? When the outside world offers nothing interesting.
The mind takes over. Starts drifting, worrying, planning, rehashing. The usual routine.
It kicks back into its compulsive cycle because there's nothing immediately compelling in the surroundings for it to latch onto. And this observation leads us to a really critical distinction, a deepening of the whole practice of presence.
What's the distinction?
We often equate present moment awareness simply with being highly aware of our surroundings. Noticing the sights, the sounds, the smells around us right now.
Which the source calls being aware of the present without.
Yeah.
Being present to the external world.
Yes. And that's valuable, it's part of it. But the teaching here insists that true, deep presence goes further. It's more fundamentally the awareness of yourself in that moment.
Awareness of myself, how does that work?
It's not about focusing on the present without the external environment primarily. It's about cultivating presence within.
Presence within. Okay, so the essential, deeper practice, especially in those boring moments, is to consciously redirect attention.
Yes. You gently shift the focus of your awareness away from just the external world, and also away from the stream of thoughts about the world or yourself.
And direct it where?
You direct it inward, towards the simple, fundamental sense of your own being, your own presence, to be consciously present within your own skin, so to speak.
So the goal here isn't analyzing yourself or figuring things out.
No, definitely not. In fact, the goal is described in a way that bypasses the analytical mind completely. It's not about realizing who you are in terms of your personality, your history, your roles. All that is tied to the surface identity and the thought stream.
So it's not about finding my identity.
It's about realizing that you are.
That I am. Just the fact of existence.
Yes, the simple, direct, non-conceptual realization of being, the feeling of I amness before you add any labels or stories to it, pure existence, pure
Well, that's
awareness.
very fundamental.
Yeah.
Realizing that I am not who I am.
Exactly. And this inward focus, this attention to the simple fact of your own being, is what cultivates what the Source calls the sense of beingness or presence present within.
Okay, so let's try to synthesize this.
Hmm.
Being conscious of my surroundings, the sights, sounds that's being present without,
Correct.
but consciously feeling or sensing my own inner aliveness, the simple fact that I exist right here, right now, beneath the thoughts that's being present within.
Perfectly summarized. Present without and present within. And the teaching suggests that both are necessary aspects of true freedom, true presence.
They complement each other.
Absolutely. The active practice we discussed earlier, honoring the doing one thing at a time, primarily deals with how you interact with the present without, the form the present moment takes. It stops you from creating resistance and future suffering through fragmented attention.
Right. It keeps you aligned with what is externally.
And the passive practice, the deeper practice of realizing beingness within, ensures you remain anchored in that unconditioned awareness, especially when the external world isn't demanding your attention or providing easy anchors. It connects you to the formless essence within the form.
So you need both.
Yeah.
You need to honor the form the present moment takes, the doing the situation, while simultaneously realizing the formless presence that you are within that moment.
When those two dimensions align, honoring the form without, realizing the formlessness within, that's when the kidnapping of consciousness truly ends. That's the state of integrated presence.
This whole deep dive, it feels like it's offered a really profound yet practical path forward, starting from that almost absurdly simple Zen instruction, stop thinking.
It circles back, doesn't it?
It does. We've basically laid out how addressing the overwhelm, the information overload, the chronic stress so many of us feel. The most direct way might be to target the actual source of the internal noise.
Which is that involuntary identified compulsive thinking.
Right. And the implication is that the path to clarity, to knowledge, maybe even to creativity and effective action, only really opens up when our consciousness isn't constantly being hijacked by that noise, when it's free.
And what's really fascinating, I think, is that this whole practice, stepping out of the thought movement, honoring the doing, finding the presence within, it's all ultimately about freeing the I, freeing your sense of self from being trapped in that superficial, noisy layer of compulsive thought.
Reclaiming the I for the deeper awareness.
Exactly. And the journey, as we saw, starts so simply. It doesn't necessarily require some huge, dramatic life overhaul overnight. It can start right now in this moment,
Wow.
with the recognition that you can choose, just for this instant, not to believe the next compulsive thought, or to bring your full attention to one breath, or to truly honor the feeling of your hands holding your cup. It starts with one conscious moment.
Remembering that the peace is the natural baseline. The initial bliss is just the shock of waking up to it.
And the work is simply recognizing how consciousness gets trapped, and then gently, persistently applying these two practices. Presence in action, presence in rest.
Honoring the doing, realizing the beingness.
That's the essence. Which leads us, I suppose, to a final provocative thought for you, the listener, to maybe carry away from this deep dive.
Okay, let's hear it.
We talked earlier about removing yourself from toxic situations like a soul-destroying job, even though it means stepping into uncertainty.
Right, the conscious choice to leave what's harmful.
Well, building on that, if we consider that the total identification with involuntary compulsive thought is itself the original internal toxic situation, the fundamental source of our internal suffering and lack of peace.
The ultimate soul-destroying environment, but it's inside us.
Kind of, yes. If that's the primary toxicity, then what radical step toward uncertainty might be required today, right now, in this very moment, to begin freeing your consciousness from that situation?
What does stepping out of identification feel like in practice?
Perhaps the first, most radical step is simply to pause, just for a second. Take a conscious breath. And instead of immediately jumping onto the next thought, try to feel the answer to that deeper question. Not who am I, but the simple, direct realization that I am, separate from whatever story the mind wants to tell next. What uncertainty does that conscious pause invite?